Today I'm 81, and I dedicated my life, most of my life, to arts and culture. Not expected to become an artist. I wasn't talented enough, to be honest. And so, however, I studied in a higher college and I learned metal, driving, engraving, design, arts in general. And our professors, they insisted on, we have to have our working tools to prepare ourselves. They said, if you don't create a hammer you need for sizzling, you have no feeling for the metal. And so, in our education, we were in the technical department to form the head of a hammer and a handle in the so-called, how I call it, let's say the hammer had to fit into the hand, and that's why it needs to swing, and each hand is different. And so they insisted on, you have to make your working tools yourself. And this helped us to think, to learn. If we don't know where we come from, what we are doing, we do not develop our full sense of capacity we have within us. And so after I finished, after 3 years, I felt, okay, world, here is the artist to come. I must admit, at first I served my country at the German Air Force. Next to the place, I intend to further study arts, drama, and performing arts. And so it was next to Munich, where the Air Force Base was, and I couldn't leave my pencil. And so I designed a new squadron branding. And today it flies throughout the world. So there were a certain talent I couldn't deny, but no artist, to be honest. And after I finished the Air Force service, I went to the drama school, and there was 120 people tried to enter. And they will only take 10. And so I said, well, if they take you, I had my uniform at that time, because hitchhiking was easier in uniforms. Because I had not the money to go from the airbase to Munich. And finally, people who attended the competition as well to get a place, whom you are waiting for? I said, I want to perform myself. Oh, in uniform? Very strange. Well, however, I participated, and a month later I got the invitation of acceptance. I was stunned and happy. And they said, well, you can start in the next semester. And I said, I don't have the money. Oh, well, if you don't have the money, I said, what can I do to prepare myself to enter into this drama school? And they said, oh yes, learn singing and learn fencing. Oh, fine, thank you very much. And I went back home, finally learned fencing. It was finally member of the German fencing team, and learned singing and hear the breathing and to observe the tones I give. And it helped me to evaluate later on singers and their technique, not knowing at that time that all of this contributes out of my curiosity to know. And I finally liked the arts in general, and so I focused on supporting artists myself out of the reason that I couldn't be an artist. And I helped singers to get on stage, and I helped dancers, and I helped painters. And out of the reason of my education at the college, and we visited many museums, teachers and professors taught us how to evaluate a picture, what to look at in a picture. It's not just the frame, how you evaluate composition. This all helped me. And so I helped with this knowledge, I helped painters and singers. And there the final studies started for me, because I learned life in the backstage. The audience never sees what's behind the screen. How to deal with artists, how to organize, how to show off. And finally, it all contributed to the acknowledgement, hey, why my artists were mainly non-Europeans, why they were Asians or Americans or British. How come? Are we not good enough here in Europe, and particularly in Germany? And I searched within the spare time I had as finance and economic advisor. I worked at that time. What is the education system? How come? Why is the difference? And it was not the lack of talent, but the result of the Second World War. Because the talents left Europe. They became refugees. The professors taught their knowledge somewhere else. And with this, I developed a certain sensitivity for peace, for how to prevent and how to share. And with this, I said I have to draw the teachers back. I have to set up a system, a competition system, a floor where they can start. And out of the learning of my singers, they told me, and for example, one singer, she was a prima donna and sang the soprano, the Queen of the Night, and all other performances in the Vienna State Opera, and she wanted to increase her repertoire. And she said, that's why I have to go to Munich, to a smaller opera house, and learn there. And there we met. And she said, Chistian, you heard now the 6th time this rehearsal. In the evening when my normal working time was over, you must be tired of listening to that. I said, no. I hear every time something different. It sounds different. You act different. And that's how I trained my ears to listen, to see, and to admire arts from show business, just to show. And I learned from her, for example, that her teacher was a European, Eva Likova, from East Europe, so to speak, yeah? And she said, without her, I wouldn't be here. And with this, I learned and said, let's help our talents to grow. Because my friend said, she's singing as good as I do. But I tell you, I learned in my studies to sing them off the stage. I learned to fight for my role I wanted to create. Without empathy, I cannot act. And these were recipes from my learning, helping me to prepare myself for thinking about creating a floor, an organization possibly, who can help to sustain, to increase education in arts and culture. And here, in my little life, I had the metal performing, the precision of engraving, of design, of graphic, and now sound and painting. And I could collect it. I was the swan, so to speak, in digesting it. And this was the very first training for me to say, to help as a main profession, rich people becoming richer as lifetime goal can't be my task. Yes, that's a good question. I never thought about Delphic Games. I just thought about setting up a competition in the arts. And when I spoke to experts, they said, oh my God, are you stupid? Art cannot have a competition. Art is too individual. It's very different. You cannot develop an organization, a system. I said to myself, funny. Let me look for what kind of system exists in comparison, in competition. And I went to associations, of very kind associations, also in sports education. But it doesn't satisfy me because it was either too nationalistic and not open enough, or professor said, a competition? My singers are the best. So they cannot become better through something else. And I sensed that in the education fields there are very often you meet people loving to be the artists themselves, and they donate their time for bringing creative talents alive. And I said, a competition is the best. However, it needs rules. And rules in singing I learned from my singers. Because they said to me, a good singer, a mid-sized singer, or a bad singer, a trier. I heard it from my talents I helped. And so I was guided to the Olympic Games and said, oh, now let's make Olympic music games. And I was proud about it. And I started to design the paperwork, and I received a letter, from the National Olympic Committee of Germany. I was happy. Opened that. We write to you on behalf of the IOC, don't dare to use the name Olympic. Was the summary of the letter. And you know, if an ant gets attacked by an elephant, there are two ways to run away, or to go on your legs, looking up to the elephant, and then to find the weak points, the ear, where they cannot ignore you anymore. But to prepare myself to that way, I went to Professor Dr. Helmut Flasser from the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, classical philology professor, and said, I need your help. And he said, yes, tell me how I can help you. And I told him what you already know. He listened, smiled, kept quiet, and said, what you are doing has nothing to do with Olympia. This is Delphi. Oh, Delphi? What do you know about Delphi? Well, I said Greece, a city in Greece, and Oracle of Delphi. He said, this is not even half of the story. There's much more behind. It was the counterpart to the Olympic Games for about 1,000 years. And my speciality are the Pythian or Delphic Games. I was very grateful and said, would you teach me? He said, yes, if you take it serious, would you mind? I help you. And so I learned from him what Delphi is all about. That it's not just a location in Greece, but it is the meeting point of reaching out into modern times of today, producing, creating the Amphictyonia. I'd never heard this word before, Amphictyonia. This was the association, the 12 tribes of Greece, formed after 3 holy wars for owning the oracle and the Delphic Games. And after 3 wars, they recognized it's not worthwhile to fight. Let's unite and get stronger together. And this is the secret of the Amphictyonia, and this is the answer why the United Nations organization has in his legacy the Amphictyonia of Delphi. Peace. And with this, he said, make up your mind if you like it, if you change the name or what you want to do. And I must admit, there were 2 restless days and nights. I changed all my documents, and at that time there were no electric typewriter, so everything had to be typed, retyped, and my typing was not so great. And this was the Delphic Games of modern times, the beginning. And now I had to learn from the Greeks. I must admit, by destiny, I don't work for it to go to Greece. The first step was the education of Professor Flasser. And thereafter, by, I would say, God Apollo, a friend of mine who knew that I worked as finance and economic advisor internationally, he said, I have a client in Greece. Would you help me and join me and assisting me to solve the problems? I said, yes, of course. And so it matched. And I came to Greece. And finally, I ended up in Greece for more than a year. I learned the language. And I learned, and Greeks, by destiny, by their roots. For example, Melina Mercouri, I don't know if you heard about her. She was the initiator of the European Capital of Culture every year. And she was a singer and Minister of Culture of Greece. And she and I, we had a wonderful conversation and met several times at home. And also, I don't know, Mikis Theodorakis, I met. And Stavros Xarchakos, the so-called creme de la creme of the composers, the musicians. And Stavros Xarchakos, for example, was the designated Minister of Culture of Nea Demokratia, the Conservative Party, and I assisted him within my ability. And so I lived in Greece and digested the breathings of the Greeks, the language, and I recognized it's the same as in Germany. Very often, people don't know enough about their history. Sometimes they take it for granted, but they don't see the precious values. But Greece is a gold mine for those who see precious values, spirit of the spirit. And if we consider in Europe that the ancient wisdom of Greece took, before it came to Central Europe and came towards Christianity, it took a route through the Islamic countries, through the southern country, Spain, Al-Andalus, and came through Christianity and the monks into Central Europe, and we learned from them even writing and literature. So one leads to another, and we are closer connected as we think.